Khruangbin, a psychedelic funky trio that weave world music influences into their mostly instrumental music. And they have a new album out just this week, and I want to show you how to create that sound in your DAW of choice. Let's dive in. One thing to remember with this live guitar vibe is that the better quality plugins you're using, the better your overall track is going to sound. But fear not, this week I'll be including 2 versions of the project over at the Patreon. Of course, you'll get the stems and the Live 11 or 12 project as normal, with the instruments found here: Neural DSP, Ample Sound, and One Shot. But if you don't have those plugins, you can download the version I've created with Ableton's onboard sounds. That's completely free instruments. The most difficult and important part of this process is going to be nailing the tone, which I'll cover at the end. But without highlighting the fundamentals of the playstyle first, you'll be at a disadvantage. So let's start off with the backbone of the track, the drums. Now, I've featured One Shot on the channel a couple of times now, and it has become my favorite plugin to use when it comes to that meaty acoustic kit sound. And you can download my presets for One Shot if you also have it over at the page too. That kick and snare really quantized and kept on the first and third quarter notes of each bar. The hi-hats I'm actually going to keep fairly unquantized, as you can see here. And if you notice, the first velocity is much higher than the following 3 velocities of the hi-hat. Later on in the demo, after the first drum fill, I'm actually putting that accent on the offbeat. The difference here being this versus this. Perfect. You'll want the occasional fill, so try to replicate the same snare velocity that comes with the dominant hand leading the fill. So you can see that this velocity is much louder than this velocity, because that will be the left hand following that dominant hand. Super easy drum fill. At the beginning of the bar, I'm just replicating what the guitar is going to play. Super easy stuff. The processing on these drums, I've just got my BetterHelp device, which you can find over at the Patreon. It's just giving a little transient shape to these drums so they pop a little bit more. It's giving a slightly darker tone to help with that analog feel. And towards the latter half, I'm just going to double up with a tambourine just to give a little accent to the snare. For the most part, keep it simple. It's all about the guitar today. And with that said, let's look at the guitars. Khruangbin have an almost Egyptian sound in a lot of their tracks, so I choose a scale that's going to help with that vibe, and for today I've gone with the D-sharp Phrygian scale. Notice straight off the bat that notes don't really fall outside of kind of this 6-note scale here, apart from a couple of exceptions. We're going to keep things very close with the melody so that other elements can play outside of that variation. But it does play fairly uniquely all the way through the 8-bar loop, meaning that even though we're repeating a lot of the same notes, we're playing it in a different rhythm each time. Populate the main notes in the piano roll first before going back and adding trills and slip notes, all the playful stuff. Adding slip notes or accidentals will give it a jazzier sound, and adding triplets will keep the rhythm interesting. They don't sound too nice on their own, but amongst the playing, it feels really human. I also kept my playing unquantized to give it the most human feeling. This is a live band after all, so we don't want any robotics here. Now we're going to double back to this guitar in just a minute because we have to cover how to get that psychedelic tone, so don't go anywhere. Before then, let's look at the rhythm guitar. So if you're new to my episodes, this is going to look a bit strange for the rhythm guitar, but it's because I'm using Ample Sound semi-hollow on the strummer mode. This allows me to play chords with just one note of the MIDI keyboard. And those chords pretty much are D sharp minor, A sharp major, and F sharp major. And coupled with the guitar melody, we get this. So now you're drawing in the bass melody, and I found it easier to pull this bass up to the lead guitar. Put these side by side, double click on that first clip, shift click on the second clip, and here you can see your bass melody alongside your lead guitar. Bass is where all the funk stuff lies. 6 notes to a bar works really well. The first note on the downbeat and then 2 notes on the offbeat and then repeat. This gives a solid disco rhythm, and notice also how the bass plays above and below the guitar melody line. So remember, I mentioned we're keeping the guitar notes super central so you can vary the bass melody a little bit. So again, now we get this. I've resampled our 2 guitars here in just one section, and I've reversed that clip to give a rising effect and sweep into our next section. You'll give that kind of tape feel by adding a little bit of chorus and some Valhalla. Without that, it just feels a bit thin. This is where we get some vocals too. You don't have to be a world-class singer because they're going to be pretty low in the mix. They're more for layers than anything else. So I just ended up recording into my phone. And you can see here that I've picked the best clips that work. So I'm copying basically the main punch lines of this lead guitar. Let's play those together. Not all of the notes, but just kind of the main melody. I'm taking down some of the louder, poppier notes with this peak clipping guitar preset in the glue compressor. For auto-tune, I only ever use Waves Tune real time. It's got all the parameters I need to auto-tune my vocal. Let's just pull in those pitchy notes down a little bit. And as I mentioned, I had a higher vocal too. And then you'll really get that washed out feel by adding a chorus. I actually added 2, so you get some kind of like phase. I've got the Valhalla Vintage Verb. If you don't have this plugin, use Valhalla Supermassive. It's free. I got the mastering preset here. And then the EQ8, just to get rid of a real peaky note. A line delay is going to set your vocals a little bit wider. So now we get this. That's going to be really buried in the mix. Now let's look at getting that tone. It's the most finicky, but really illuminates what makes Khruangbin fantastic. Once again, it's really in the richness of the devices you use to nail that tone, and I couldn't think of anything better than Neural DSP. I've been having a blast with these amp simulators. I used them on my most recent nu metal tutorial, and there's a couple here that I would strongly recommend that truly give versatility to mold your sound. First, let's look at Morgan Amp Suite. Both archetypes will be linked in the description, and everything at Neural DSP has a free trial, so absolutely check them out. Now, if you haven't seen my nu metal tutorial, let me give you a highlight as to what we're looking at the top. Each archetype is met with the pre-effects, the amp, the cab, the EQ, and the post effects. Now let's build this first lead guitar tone together. We are going to use the pre-effects. We'll keep the gate where it is. That'll just get rid of some annoying buzzy hums, and we'll just turn this output up a little bit. I'm going to keep this playing under everything I'm doing, so hopefully you hear some kind of changes as we go along. Let's start by turning the compressor on, maybe taking that down to about 1/3. We'll set it to slow, and we'll pull that level up to about 2/3. I think I want some tremolo to give it that kind of like tape, kind of psychedelic feel. We're going to sync this up. Let's set that to about halfway with the depth at like maybe just 1/4 level. We'll leave where it is. Then we'll move on to the EQ. We'll start by high passing this a little bit. I guess we can roll these off too. Just leave room for your bass. We can low pass this a little bit as well. We're going to kind of sweep this up. Maybe get rid of some of the muddy stuff here. And we can boost these, have these stand out, and just roll this down a little bit. Not that it matters, we've got that low pass there. And finally, we have our post effects. Let's start by turning the mix up all the way. We're going to keep this synced on DAW. Let's turn the high pass up so we don't have any, again, of that low muddy stuff. Let's turn the feedback up about 50%. Increase the tape drive as well. Great, and then we'll pull that mix down so we get a nice balance. It's going to be really subtle, and then the reverb. Cool. High pass, again, about a third of the way up. I think that'll do it. Awesome stuff. Let's listen to that in the context of the mix. I've got these other plugins here, but they're really just kind of taming some of those peaky notes. They're not adding to the sound at all. I'll turn them on and off so you can hear the difference, and it should be ever so subtle. Let's look at a couple of presets that we didn't get a chance to look at with the lead guitar. So firstly, we've got our amp here, which we can kind of cut frequencies, add power to the amp, and change that amp design as well, which might have a little bit more effects like the reverb here or more EQ effects. This is my favorite part of the whole Neural DSP plugin, where you can actually move the mic placements or change the microphones here. Here I've got a 414, which I actually have here with me. It's a lovely flat response microphone, wonderful to use on vocals, as overheads, or as we see here with an amp. And we can change how the sound is perceived, whether it's more of a bassy tone or something that's slightly crisper. And we can kind of pan those frequencies a little bit to the left and right, which is what I think we'll do. But let's go through some of the presets as well. Let's maybe start here with Blue Hotel and see what that sounds like. That's nice. So a little bit too delay filled there. Let's go with the next preset, Cleanish Ambient Solo. Oh, that's really lovely. So we just want to dial this in. I'm going to use that 414 once again. Just take that out to the edge. And let's combine this with maybe a Ribbon 160. And pan these out to the left and out to the right and match those volumes. Lovely stuff. Okay, yeah, a little bit less bass. And we'll just take that volume down a little bit as well. Let's combine that with a little bit of sidechain compression, which is linked to our lead guitar, so it always kind of plays under the lead guitar. This is Corey Wong's Archetype. Look how gorgeous this looks. Everything from the wah pedal design. So lovely. So we've got our pre-effects here. How wonderful are these little logos? And of course we could swap the cabs and the amps out as well as we have before. We've got our EQ as you've seen it. And we've got our post effects. It all just looks so gorgeous. And this time around, I'm just going to use some of Corey Wong's bass tones. That's lovely, but I think it'll be too abrasive. That's really clean. Let's see how that compares to the wide. They're really similar. It's got a little bit more fret noise. Let's use the wide bass tone and just roll off some of that fret noise. Lovely. Maybe pull that output down. You would think we would be done at this point, but there's one final thing to remember. This band is a live band recording in the studio, so you want to think about your processing. In their recordings, you can really hear the hiss of the amps and you can hear the saturation of the guitars and the drums. So in your chain, include something that replicates that analog sound. For ease, I've grouped this as you may want some instruments that don't apply to this rule. Check this out. What we're going to do is add Lifeline Console, which will add a little bit of compression, some pre-EQ just to scoop out some notes here, some post-EQ, which is doing some mid-side stuff, rolling off a lot of our lows that we'll get in the sideband profile. We can add a little bit of wear, and that increases some noise that you might hear there. We'll kind of dial that in, make it nice and subtle. And then finally add in a little bit of modulation with the cassette here. If we increase that wow sound, we'll get it more detuned, which we maybe don't want. So I'm pulling that right down. It's super, super subtle stuff. So there we have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. What do you think of the new album? Have you had a chance to listen? And what would you like to see in future tutorials? Let me know down in the comments below. For now, guys, thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.